Hi, welcome back to Burning River Bushcraft. Today we're going to be doing a review on the Skookum Bushtool. So I have longer history with other knives, but if I had to choose one, this is it. The Skookum Bushtool is, for my area and the type of wood crafting that I like to do, the Skookum Bushtool is the ultimate bushcraft knife. So the Skookum Bushtool is made by Rod Garcia, and it is designed by Mors Kochanski. Mors Kochanski's idea of the perfect bushcraft knife is a handle that fits the hand and a blade about hand width, about palm width. And this knife fits me about perfect. This knife is completely unobtainable. This is one of those knives that you just can't get. I ordered one from Rod. It took me 1,000 days to get it. 1,000 freaking days I waited for this knife. Actually, I got two. This is the 01 tool steel version. So this is a simple carbon steel. Of the two, this is the one I use the most. It's a pretty thin stock knife. I'm not sure if that's an 1/8 or a little bit thinner. Very light, very small, and the grip is about perfect. This grip fits my hand absolutely perfectly. It's got a great palm swell. It rises a little bit. It's got a little bit of indentations here on the side, and that helps you draw it from the sheath. If you look on the back, there is a welded steel pommel. There is really not much in the woods that I can beat against even a Micarta handle and chip it, because in the 1,000 days while I was idly waiting away for my Skookum Bushtool, I've used tons of other knives. I used the Bushcrafter that I did a review on. I've used the Pathfinder knife. I've used the Rocky Woodland Forge knives, and I've just beat the living snot out of it. My opinion is this is probably not needed, this welded on steel cap. So the one thing I have used the welded pommel for that I just don't use regular Micarta for is like the hickory trees behind me. When I'm trying to harvest nuts out of those, either for bait or to eat them, a lot of times I'll just hold them on a stump and crack them with the back of my knife. Not needed. I could find a rock. I could do it a bunch other ways, but since I've got a awesome, cool, super nice bushcraft knife with a welded pommel, that's about the best reason I've found for it. So moving on from the end of the knife, besides the welded butt cap, this is a 5-pin knife. So I have 3 solids and 2 hollow pins. I don't use them so much. I don't use a lanyard with this knife. It's nice to have. If I was ever in an environment with deep snow in Ohio, that's really not that common of an occurrence. This actually, in Mors Kochanski's Bushcraft book, he uses this to lash it to a stick, or uses this as an example of lashing a knife to a stick. That is not something that you're actually going to make a spear with that everybody thinks, but it would be more like if I wanted to harvest some sumac or something from a tree, some sumac berries just out of reach, which are all where all the good ones are. I can lash this to a stick real quick, get the right angle so I'm not holding a sharp knife directly over my head, and go ahead and harvest, berries or nuts or whatever I'm trying to cut out of a tree. So this knife came super sharp. The 90-degree spine was ridiculously sharp. I touched it with my hand and I sent a splinter of steel into my hand. This knife is ready to go right from the box, which it should be if you're going to take 1,000 days to build a knife. The flare on the front does a great job locking my hand in. I've never had my hand slide forward in this knife, even when I'm wearing gloves. So speaking of sheath, this knife is part of a system, and I dig systems. I get into that. This is a neck knife. This is a neck sheath, designed to be worn around the neck. It's part of the cool factor. It was a Mors Kochanski thing. So I am a fan of neck knives. I do carry a neck knife. This is a little bit large for a neck knife, even though this is on the smaller side of the bushcraft knives. To carry a main knife around your neck requires a little bit of a commitment. So Mors always advocated the neck carry. His thing was you're aware of the knife all the time. You're less likely to lose it. I'm up for that. That's a great idea. Neck carry is a pain in the ass sometimes. This time of year, this is February, I've got 2 collars on actually. Besides this wool anorak, I've got a fleece underneath it. And it's great with this. I don't feel the weight of the knife. In the summertime, however, carrying a full-size knife like this around your neck really becomes a pain in the ass. This is a simple leather thong that I put around here. Matches the sheath. I was so excited I found the proper color. The sheath on this knife is really something else. It's a Scandinavian style back sewn sheath. Great job on this sheath. This sheath is like borderline work art. Some people don't care for it. Because I desired this knife and had to wait so darn long for it, there's really nothing else like this out there. It's dipped in wax, so the sheath itself is actually hard. And you hear that awesome retention. This is like about perfect. A little bit of wiggle in there. I mean, you could fall out of a tree stand and you're gonna have your knife with you. You fall out of a canoe, you're gonna have your knife with you. In any situation like that, a neck knife, that's a lot of people's big things, is you're got a greater possibility of choking yourself or whatever. So, you know, if you've got a hood on, you can choke yourself with that just as easy. But it's just something to be aware of. But great retention, great knife. In a camp setting especially, I love having a neck knife. I'm sitting down right now. I don't have access to my belt knife. My neck knife, as I'm working, I can always get it out easy. And it's the safest type of sheath for a camp setting like this, because if I don't have a neck knife and I can't access my belt, I'm gonna set the knife down. You set the knife down, you could lose it, but you've also got a chance of stepping on it, have somebody sitting on it, just all kinds of bad things. And a knife like this should be in your hand or in a sheath. There's really no other place for it. Setting down knives in the middle of a project like that is usually a bad thing. As far as using a knife this style, this blade tip is just about perfect. When I went to this style knife after spending so much time with a Kephart or a French trade style knife, this is such a fine, small tip that you can really get in places that prior to using this knife, I could only do with like a true Sloyd style carving knife. So like a 103 Mora or something similar to that, a green woodworking knife. This tip is excellent at carving, doing any type of fine work where you're making a square notch in a hole or any kind of really fine line edges. This will do a perfect job on it. So since I had around 1,000 days between when I ordered my knife to when I got it, I had a little bit of time on my hands to research. I looked over the used market, was unable to find one that wasn't at a ridiculous scalper's price. But some of these knives actually had a broken tip on them. They would just be a micro break. I don't know if they changed the grind on this. This looks like a nice, fine little tip on here. I haven't had an issue. This is a small knife. You know, this is probably an under a 4-inch blade, or right at a 4-inch blade maybe. A knife like this, you just don't want to pick up a huge club and beat on it all day. I've batoned the living hell out of this thing. I've beat it into stuff from the pommel. I've never babied this knife, never will baby this knife. But just the nature of the beast, this isn't a big 8 or 10-inch blade where I'm going to be batoning it through 6 and 7-inch logs. You've got to use your head a little bit when you're limited with a smaller tool like this. You would create wedges and drive them through that way, so you're going to think about other ways to solve the problem instead of immediately getting a stick and beating on your blade with it. So as I mentioned before, this knife is a great carving knife. It does feather sticks all day long. So here's just a quickie feather stick. Any woodcrafting type project that you choose to do, this Skookum Bushtool is going to be ideal for. So as I've been doing lately, I'm going to be using this knife to carve a primitive trap. Trapping is a critical bushcraft survival skill. Any type of wilderness living skills you plan on working on, it should incorporate some way to gather food off the wild. And carving a primitive trap is probably #1 on my book. I'm going to be using the Skookum Bushtool exclusively to carve a Siberian Deadfall trap. So if you're interested in seeing more of the Skookum Bushtool or how I carve a Siberian Deadfall trigger, go ahead and follow the link below. So no knife is perfect. This one's pretty close in my opinion. I think Mors did a great job designing this from his years and years and years in the bush. And I believe Rod Garcia makes a pretty darn good knife with this. He took Mors' idea and really turned it into a beautiful knife. The sheath is a great addition to it. There are times of year that I consider a neck knife almost mandatory, and around this time is pretty close to it. Anytime it's winter and I've got like a wool anorak on or anything where I'm changing clothes commonly to deal with the weather, I don't have access to my belt knife. That's when I really love a neck sheath. So to keep this knife in context, this was Mors Kochanski's ideal bushcraft knife. Mors' background is northern boreal forest. In that situation, you really need an axe. An axe and a saw ideally would build your shelter, build your fire. This would be for camp task, carving any other type of item that you would need to make your life in the woods a lot easier. So with that in mind, it's unfair to look at this knife and come into the eastern woodlands and say, well, I can't baton through, you know, a 6-inch piece of oak with this thing. You can, you just have to go about it a different way. So nothing is perfect. This knife is pretty darn close in my opinion. If I'm going to point out the positives, it's going to be size. This is a great size knife. A 5-inch belt knife is a wonderful size knife for your belt. For any other type of carry, this is about it. This is a great user size knife. Rarely do you need to pick up a larger tool if you've got a comfortable, sharp knife this size in your hand. The back half of this knife is perfect in my opinion. I love a squared welded steel pommel. The Micarta scales fit wonderfully. They're super durable. It fits my hand absolutely perfectly. I would not change a single thing about this grip. This is the perfect size grip. If we're going to carry this down, I think there's no reason not to have hollow tubes on a knife handle like this. It gives me more options. Again, I'm not making a spear and attack on wild boar with this thing, but just to lash it to a stick to be able to harvest something from an upper branch of a tree is a great option. So we got 01 tool steel, monster 90-degree spine on this thing, super sharp, great edge all the way through, and the tip on this knife is really perfect for bushcraft. Any type of wood working you're doing, a small fine tip with this is great. Not the best for skinning. It would probably not be a bad idea if you had a dedicated skinning knife or something besides this, if you had access to multiple tools in the woods. So another positive is the neck carry. This is an awesome sheath. This thing looks great. It's super functional. It starts to get a little nicks and stuff as I wear it through the woods. I've got some coffee stains on it and stuff, but I'm not a knife collector. So when I pass away, my kids are going to look at my stuff and say, wow, Dad must have really liked this one because it's the most worn. I'm not one to have something brand new and my kids will say, wow, this is a really good one because Dad never used it. That's not what I'm after with this. This sheath breaks in, wears well, has great retention, and really completes the system. So if we want to talk about negatives, we're going to go right back to the same thing that I thought was a positive. This neck carry is a pain in the ass sometimes a year. When it's like 90 out and I'm out here doing something, this knife and this sheath wearing around your neck sucks when you're just wearing a t-shirt. I've actually, on my second Skookum, I put a dangler belt sheath just so I can carry it, so I've got a little more options. So from good to bad, the neck sheath has its moments, but it is a negative certain times a year. I have 0 negatives with the knife itself. My only other negative is getting one. Rod Garcia apparently doesn't make enough of these knives. They're fairly inexpensive when you buy them new. I think they're $200, $220. On the secondary market, they jump up to like $500, $600 in a heartbeat. They're hard to find. They're hard to find because they're so freaking great, actually. So dealing with rod is another issue. I ordered this knife and I was in a situation where I was going to be around a coastal environment, so I wanted a CMP version, a stainless version of this knife, or a more corrosion resistant super steel. So I emailed him and he did add it to the order, so I was able to purchase 2 knives at once, which is great. I appreciate the fact that he did this, but you think that you are putting letters in a bottle and throw them in the ocean. He's not real good with responding to you. You might get an email back 8 months after you initially type your order in, and it'd be like, okay, I got it, and that's it. And then you don't hear from him again for 2 years. It's not the best customer service, but he does a hell of a job making a knife. So this is the Siberian Deadfall carved with a Skookum Bushtool. Absolutely zero challenge for this knife. This knife is a beast. Again, if you're interested in learning how I carve my Siberian Deadfall, or you just want to see more of the Skookum in action, follow the link. And so all my other knives I've been kind of rating on a scale of 1 to 10. This knife, I would be hard pressed not to say it's a 10. This knife is just about perfect. Love the size, love the shape, love the function. What little bit of negatives to it, you can overcome without a whole lot of issue. If you're ever lucky enough to purchase one, go ahead and pick up the Skookum Bushtool. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe, click like, leave comments down below. Until next time, this has been Jamie Boggs for Burning River Bushcraft. See you soon.